checked myself actually just recently with another individual has a student there. Her husband works there as a coach at Fort Zumwalt East. Just spoke to her last week. And she has a student there. They actually check the vehicles coming on and off the lot by their security. And I'm thinking, how wonderful would that be if Winsfield did the same? You know, I would love for that to be available to my students, so my children feel safe. You know, what about possibly not only just taking a driver's license or checking a vehicle, because quite frankly, the entire front of that school, the school parking lot is being run by the students. And when I have these conversations with the principal, I really feel like this. I feel like the students are running them. They're not running the school. Your presence in the building is not out front. That's why you had an intruder make it all the way up into the doorway, the foyer of the entry of the building there. I took a look at some more stats, and I actually was just looking at my issues. So, you know, I looked up what the state of Missouri currently has funded from the federal government. You know, in 2016, it says some 57% of the schools reported the presence of at least once a week of security staff. The number, while an increase over the prior years, leaves almost half Americans' public schools without regular school security staff presence. Okay, that came from the 2019 Missouri School Safety Task Force report. And then I'm looking at, you know, the funds. There's funding going into task force like this, but where is it in these schools? I know we have a tax bracket and people, you know, there's a high tax bracket for the Winsfield area and the Winsfield School District.
It is.
But, you know, could we not, and that's not hand, you know, body checking or patting anybody down like they possibly do at the airport when you're going through you know, TSA. But, you know, why can't we just have hand wands where you wand a backpack? And that's another issue. When, you know, you can randomly...
What about a metal detector?
Well, I was going there next because I was just working in the building down in Jefferson with the state of Missouri where probation and parole took up the entire floor just below us. And as soon as we walked in the door, there is exactly just that to walk through, or you have to fob to get in a door. Mm-hmm. The idea of me, you know, thinking of random book bag checks, and I'm thinking of book bags because... How many folks out there really don't realize that these kids aren't using their lockers anymore?
Yeah, they just haul everything in the book bag.
The days of locker days are over.
Yeah.
And so these backpacks are everything.
Monstrous.
And they're weighing, they weigh as much as the body that's carrying themselves. So, I mean, what's inside these book bags?
Well, I had somebody, I mentioned to somebody, because I'm a big proponent of metal detectors in schools. And the individual I was discussing this with said, why? I don't want to live in a day and age where we have to have metal detectors in the schools. I said, dude, we're there.
How about the day and age of a pandemic called COVID-19, and how about an uprising from George Floyd when we have, you know, rioting in the streets that is not, you know, it's Antifa or it's Black Lives Matters driven, and you have people looting and burning down buildings like we did when we had Ferguson. Hello.
We live in interesting times.
Yes, well, the times are now, and this is where, I mean...
This isn't the Beaver Cleaver days anymore.
Thank you. If they know who Beaver Cleaver is, I do.
Okay, as do I. So.
But I, you know, I can tell you, I mean, that kind of rolls into national security and immigration. I mean, I look at national security, I guess, from a different perspective, too, because that's part of where, you know, my run for this congressional seat, I've lived on foreign soil. I know what it's like as an American citizen, the freedoms that we have. When I came back in the early 2000s, and then we had the attack on 9/11, you know, it didn't surprise me. It really didn't surprise me at all, because I feel like, you know, we've got a broken system. It's now, I mean, that's why I'm so glad that President Trump is doing what he's doing. I think the wall just signifies the security that we're building. I mean, we've got, you know, so much technology and satellites and drones and all of these things. I think people just need to be cognitive of it. And I think now we're starting to come of age of that, because I really do believe we're in an awakening right now. It's not just the, you know, the hashtag I'm woke. We are truly in an awakening. And I've been there for a long time. I think I'm meant and destined for this. And for those experiences that I have, I mean, I can conceivably take us there. And when we look at school security and we look at national security, it all goes hand in hand. And even I'm leading your interview.
You're my guest, and if you weren't going in the right direction, I'd certainly lead you differently.
Well, I'm thinking, you know, defunding police. I mean, our police force, I've thought for many, many years, need to be more militant, like they used to be. And we used to recruit from the military. What has happened with that? And
well, I mean, the whole defunding the police. Well, there's defunding the police and there's disbanding the police, which or is a little bit different, but it's one and the same. I mean, if you take away the money, what are you going to do? If you totally disband it, I mean, massage it, sure. Change it, absolutely. More training and different protocol, absolutely. But defund or it's ridiculous.
Well, that brings,
how will that work?
Well, that brings
there's
us
no law and order.
Well, I agree with you that, and I would tell you too that brings us to Blaine Luetkemeyer again. I mean, the only legislation that he seems to have proposed or drafted to push through is always somebody else's, and that he's working with. Like he's currently put in this article that is out of the Lincoln County Journal, which is actually, I brought it with me because I just wanted to. That Tuesday,
sure.
Tuesday, July the 7th, you'll find the article of Blaine's Bulletin. Mm-hmm. Blaine's Bulletin is usually the day's news, and it's recast and put out as his bulletin on the news of the day. We've already gotten it off Fox or whatever. But the White House is now developing the Justice Act, which I'm all for, and I'm all for backing the legislation in that. What
is the Justice Act, please?
Well, the Justice Act is actually it's basically for more training, more transparency, and accountability. And enables officers in the community, to be able to tap those resources. I do think we need to do some things like that. I think we need to see our military look more, though, like a SWAT team instead of a SWAT team. I mean,
military or police?
I'm sorry, did I say military? You know how I'm always thinking. I am. I look at police as like the military, and I mean to call in, the National Guard. I think that we should probably bring in some of the National Guard or some of our military to train our police.
Well, now would we want to bring in the National Guard if things get out of hand, or would we want the police to have that power?
Well, I don't think our police, to be honest with you, in current times that we're in, we've got a lot of police academies. And as a matter of fact, we've got one right up here in Lake St. Louis at the Meadows.
We do.
And I've been observing them greatly. Actually, I see them coming and going all the time. It's not a short-lived program, and I think you need to bring in, the experience of people that, just the military is just a whole different bird. And I think when you're looking at the discipline that goes into that and the training and the experiences of the military, when you bring somebody over, from that military background into the police force, we've got a lot of guys I've talked to, and it was surprising to me when I said, well, what do you have any military background? And they tell me no. And I mean, I'm looking at some of the things that are going on in the community, and you have good apples, bad apples, and everything.
Sure. Well, what comes with military training, I've never served in the military, but what I've observed in military training is the number one thing about somebody, you can tell somebody's been through military training because they're disciplined, okay? Amen. And you have the discipline. The military, to me, teaches discipline.
It teaches a lot of things.
Yeah.
A lot of things. Valor, honor.
Sure.
Integrity. You have, and that's another thing. I think when we look at the discipline behind it, there's also the physicality of just physically being fit for something. And I feel like sometimes we get to a place, that you wonder, like I'm thinking of the school security situation. It's not obviously my military or police, but I'm just thinking a person that was actually just outside the school, and I'm going back to this because I just didn't think that if there was something really that happened, how physically fit are you able to handle that challenge? That's part of the job.
That's a big deal to me too. And I'll go back to you mentioned Ferguson. I'll go back to that. And the reason I do that is because I grew up in Normandy, real close to Ferguson. My folks still live there, close to I'll tell you where it was. If you know where the Metrolink, the Hanley Road Metrolink station is.
That's exactly where it is, yes.
That's where I grew up. My folks still live there to this day. And the officer in Ferguson, he mentioned that he was afraid. If you're a policeman and you're afraid, you probably shouldn't be a policeman, okay? I think he was in the wrong business. He shouldn't have been doing that, okay? If you're not, because, okay, a police officer, also known as a peace officer. Police aren't there to bust heads of the people. I think a big reason why we had so many problems with the police in the St. Louis metro area, not so much St. Charles County, but more St. Louis County, because of all the different municipalities. There's 50, 60, 70 different municipalities and so many different police forces. And they were making all their money by ticketing people, writing tickets. and basically fleecing their own people who didn't have any money to begin with, okay? And I think if the police officers were to act more like Andy Taylor, I'm showing my age again, and less like RoboCop, I think that would help a lot. Now, if there's big problems, okay, that ship has sailed now. Now you call in the National Guard. When the Ferguson riots happened and they called in the National Guard, I knew a young man who was in the National Guard, and he told me the governor's orders were stand there and do nothing, absolutely nothing, and they watched it all burn the first night. And that was Jay Nixon, who I kind of liked the guy until that night. I think I'm not alone, because when's the last time you've heard anything out of Jay Nixon? And he at one time was going to be a vice presidential nominee. And after Ferguson, he's gone.
What do you think Greitens would have done?
Something a little bit different than Jay Nixon.
Navy SEAL.
Yeah, I think he'd have done something different.
Well, I've watched the Navy SEALs and the Army graduate out of Fort Benning Sniper School. So, yeah, I just take what's going on in a community just a little more seriously, in the fact that I don't want this for my children in their future. When you have children that have no hope, and the word hope, it's interesting because, I mean, I didn't feel that way most of my life. I've always just kept moving forward and looked forward to the next day and future plans and always planning and,
sure,
you know, and so on. And when you get into, I mean, we're talking about this entire issue we're actually discussing right now, all barrels down to the same thing. And a community is really, I mean, key. And your military, oftentimes when they're in the communities on foreign soil, are getting to know the community. And we've got people really now checked out, and I think a lot of people walk in for a paycheck. They're not really in it because they're in it because that's what they've.
Are you talking in the military or
well,
just in life?
I'm back into local community
Okay.
in regard to policing.
Okay.
And when you spoke to me just a moment ago, and you said municipalities and policing, you know, we have the sheriff's department, we have the St. Louis or St. Charles County, whichever county you're in.
Sure.
You know, the county police, and we have the sheriffs. Which one is it?
Yeah, exactly.
Which one are you? And which one are we have the Highway State Patrol.
Exactly.
So, I mean, I think that we need to, I mean, I can understand the Highway State Patrol kind of being separated out of that, but I mean, which one are we? And I think cohesively for the general population, I mean, to know, you know, we shouldn't fear our police. We shouldn't fear, you know, law enforcement. And, you know, I'm thinking about law.
And I agree with you until the police give you a reason to fear
Exactly.
them. And the whole, his name escapes me, George, help me out.
George?
The gentleman who died in
Floyd.
George Floyd. Thank
Yes.
you very much.
Yes.
I had a brain
That's all right. I got
moment
you.
there. But
I have him too.
George Floyd was killed by that policeman. He
Right.
put his knee on his neck, and
Straight up.
I had a policeman sit in your chair, and he said, "Look, I'm a policeman." He said, "I don't know what was going on there. After you handcuff that guy, you're done. There was no need for his knee to be on his neck." A policeman told me this in the podcast. He said he was either not trained properly or elected not to listen to that training.
Our personal vendetta.
Or a personal vendetta, because they both worked at the same
That's
nightclub.
correct.
So
I was waiting for you to take me there.
Yeah, they both
Yeah.
worked at the same nightclub. So I think this was a personal vendetta, and then that man's going to pay. The good part of it is I think the country as a whole has united. I know of nobody that says the policeman was in the right. Nobody. Okay, so I think we've come further, and you talk about hope. I'm a glass half full type of guy, and I have to think that things are going to get better. They've gotten better from way back when. I think they're going to get better. They have to get better, right?
Oh, it always has to get better, but you've got to do some things to take us where we need to go. Really, people right now, I tell you, out of all of this, I mean, health is obviously a concern. School security, obviously, you know, it took the backside for a moment when, you know, COVID hit, and it's right back up there again with now all the rioting and all the unrest across the nation. For me, it just puts itself right back up there. I haven't talked about child vaping laws, which is part of my platform as well, but you can read more about that in my bio on my website, which is Trares, FORcongress.com.
Spell that, please.
TRARES, FORcongress.com.
See, and this is a podcast, so you can rewind this, folks, and listen to it again.
And I also was actually just kind of segueing into the COVID recovery. I think more people right now are more concerned about how are we going to come out of this